Welcome. Today, I'm very excited to have with us Dr. Kristy Christopher-Holloway, and she's an assistant professor at Lindsey Wilson College in the School of Professional Counseling. She's also the founder and the director of New Vision Counseling Center, LLC, and also the founder of New Vision Consulting and Training, LLC, which are both located in Georgia. She's a licensed professional counselor, a national certified counselor, and a board certified telemental health provider, a counselor supervisor, and she's certified in perinatal mental health, perinatal mental health. She works with racial and ethical minority women experiencing infertility, trauma, birth trauma, reproductive loss, and issues related to maternal mental health. Dr. Christopher-Holloway is a national and international speaker with a focus on topics such as African Americans and mental health, the psycho-emotional impact of infertility in African American women, perinatal mood disorders, the strong Black women syndrome, generational trauma, cultural competency, humility, and more. She has received numerous honors, including the Breakthrough Award for Outstanding Research awarded by the National Board for Certified Counselors in recognition of her work related to mental health and infertility. So I am very glad to have you with us, Kristy. I'm very glad about the work that you're doing because it's so much needed.
Yeah.
A lot of people these days, you know the numbers, you can tell us, but I know so many people deal with infertility and loss, and I personally know several people in my life who have struggled with that. And finding someone, a specialist, to work with an individual or the couple or the family locally is really hard.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so the telehealth is probably really helpful in that regard. So yeah, if you could just maybe touch upon just the need for what it is that you provide, helping people with infertility, loss, trauma, those related issues, that would be fantastic. And I know you specifically work with African American population and infertility, and if you could touch upon that, the uniqueness of that, that would be great.
Absolutely. Well, one, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. This is one of those bucket list things, so
Nice.
definitely, yeah. Glad to be here and partnering with y'all. And being able to make sure that, and I'm thankful that you all are doing this to kind of reach the masses, right? So this is great. But yeah, I do work with folks that are experiencing infertility, as you stated, reproductive loss, and even birth trauma, and then perinatal mental health. So part of depression, postpartum anxiety, OCD, and things like that. And specifically when it relates to infertility, we have about 20% of the US population will be impacted with an infertility diagnosis every year. So it is a lot. It's huge, especially those, of course, that are in that reproductive age, whether this is male or female, but I specifically work with and focus with women and the couples, and then in African American women, because although we know the rates, Black women are about almost 2 times more likely, so 1.5 times more likely to experience the diagnosis than their counterparts. But we also know that they typically will seek help or treatment for the diagnosis at lesser rates. And so very well aware, a lot of my research is infertility, and actually some current research that I'm doing right now is in perinatal mental health and infertility. So we know that this is an under-researched population and area. And of course, when there is no research, we cannot do effective treatment, right? And those treatment outcomes and reaching this population. So it's very important to me that this is some work that I do, and being able to make sure that I'm looking at that mental health impact of infertility when we're talking about Black women and Black couples. And then, of course, as you stated too, that perinatal mental health piece, where about 1 in 7 women will experience a perinatal mood and anxiety disorder, and folks really don't know, but 1 in 10 men will experience it as well. And then yet again, Black women are about 2 times less likely to initiate treatment for a postpartum or a perinatal mood and anxiety disorder. So this is that passion piece for me. And I know we'll kind of get to it and talk about like how I'm even doing it now in the midst of COVID and doing that telehealth piece around it. But yeah.
Yeah, well, the being a man, right?
Mm-hmm.
Saying that, was it 1 in 10 experience it? I wonder if um, I wonder if that speaks to the fact that it's not just, hormonal change, but maybe just also in addition to that life change, but maybe men do go through hormonal change. I don't know. Maybe we're just not aware of it, but it is that's interesting. Yeah, because I know some people, we have our ideas of what parenting a newborn is going to be like, and then the reality hits, and just your whole life gets changed in a very drastic way. We have, my wife and I, we have 4 kids, so very aware of that process. 1 is a lot, and then 2 is a lot, and then 3 is a lot, and then 4 is a lot. I don't know that the number ever matters.
Right.
Having children is a big life change, and yeah. Yeah, so in terms of you know, another thing about this that I think is probably really important is that the loss um, is often very unacknowledged. And I find, people that I know don't always seek support
Right.
when there is a loss, a death, I should say. There's multiple losses. Those with infertility, it's the loss of the possibility, and then of course the death in utero and post birth. So yeah, I worked as a chaplain in hospitals for a while, and we would help people through those moments a lot. And yeah, there's a lot of not acknowledging it. But I wonder, has that been changing over time, or is that still a major issue? People not acknowledging, miscarriages and et cetera.
Right. So, it's so many layers to that question. And even the terminology, right? Like miscarriage, that means your body just didn't do something, right? And so even the language that's associated or connected and that stigma that comes with a loss. But sometimes, you have this disenfranchised grief or this ambiguous loss where you're not so sure if you can grieve it or how to grieve it, because like you said, there may be a loss from a miscarriage, but loss from infertility. I always tell people that when you're dealing with infertility or a loss of a child, you're grieving the future, all of these things that you thought would happen or that you would plan to happen. So even if it's very early on, you could just found out and it's 4 weeks pregnant and then it's a loss. And you're thinking, so sometimes people may say, well, you barely even knew or you didn't know. But what I tell people is that connection starts for many people. If they know they want to be a parent, that bond starts way before conception. Right. And then once you do conceive and you see that positive test or you go to the doctor, that attachment is there. And so people are grieving that. They are grieving if it's a stillborn or angel baby, a baby born sleeping, right? And that's why I said it's so many different levels and layers to it because of, how we express it, how society says we should express it. Do we say, if a person says, well, how many children do you have? And if you've lost one, do you still count them in that number? Do you don't? What happens with family pictures? If it was multiples and one didn't make it. And so many different levels. But I think people do acknowledge it. It's more about how they give themselves that permission to grieve or to acknowledge it, and then how they kind of navigate how to deal with that loss in a society who views loss very differently sometimes, or even culturally, right? Some folks culturally may just do the loss and keep it moving, where others really maintain that bond and that connection, and that loss is discussed quite often. So it's so many different angles you can come from it, but definitely one of the things that I remind people in that is, you're grieving a future. You're grieving all the, birthday parties and visits with friends and late nights and feedings and pitter patter of feet and all of those things. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and that grief happens in so many different unique ways, and there's no right or wrong. But as a therapist, the struggles that sometimes we see is when people refuse to grieve. They push it away, and so yeah, there's no right or wrong way, but encourage people to be open to the process of their unique way of grieving. Yeah. So when did you get started in telehealth, and why did you get started? I mean, you have the BCTMH credential, which, we're one of the training providers for that. So what got you started in that?
Right. So when I opened my private practice in 2008, right, I was just this generalist. I was new. I knew I needed clients, but I also wanted to have credibility and being able to reach folks. And so in 2009, I actually got trained, and it was a great training, but it was also scary, right? You're like, oh my gosh, this opens up so many more avenues and so many more things to think about. Can I counsel? And at that time, I will say, technology goes a lot faster than licensing boards. Technology can change every single day. The boards and their rules don't change every single day, right? And I remember calling the board and saying, can I do this counseling over the phone? Can I, counsel people in another state? And it was like crickets. They didn't even really know how to answer this.
I can testify to that also.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so they were like, follow the board rules. I'm like, but you have no rules on telehealth at this time. And so I knew at that time I could reach folks in Georgia. So I said, if you're a new mom, if have children at home and you can't get out, if you work different shifts, maybe you can call in. But what I wasn't too sure is if I could counsel someone in California. Well, no, I knew I couldn't in California, because California at that time was very specific about what could and could not happen. But I didn't know about Alabama or North Carolina and things. So I actually steered away from it. I spent this money and got trained. And then I got scared and kind of lost because I didn't know what I could do, and I didn't want to risk my license, right?
One of the downsides of training.
Yeah, absolutely. I had all this information, this huge manual, took the test, passed that assessment and everything. And then I said, well, what do I do with this? And so I would have, a few clients who maybe needed a phone check-in, or maybe one time or two times here and there a phone session, because we weren't, we didn't have Zoom and Doxy and all these video platforms, and Google, right? All of that stuff at that time. And so I would just kind of use it sporadically. I would use it only kind of like this as needed, but you still need it to be in the office type thing. And so from there, I expanded into a group practice. And of course, at that time, you still needed to have some type of credential, some type of certification. You couldn't just be doing phone sessions, all willy-nilly. And folks didn't really have that. It was a very expensive training at that time, to be honest. And so folks really didn't have that. And so it kind of went on the back burner. I still kept my credential up, still did the training, but I did not do as much telehealth. And it wasn't until, so I have 5.5, almost 6-year-old twins. And so it wasn't until I got pregnant. I was in my doc program and everything. And, there were times where I just couldn't get to the office, or, life happens. And so that's when I began to consider more, how can I use this credential to work for me and also to work for my clients? And the bigger I got and the slower I moved, right, and getting to the office, I knew it was time to kind of make that shift and transition and still be able to do the work that I love, but also being safe for me and being present for my clients. And so I picked it back up, right? So 5 years later, I really picked it back up and started to do more with it. And then by that time, I had people in the office as well who had kind of gotten the training or the CEs for it, but we would still only use it for phone sessions when we knew we had clients that were in the office. And then, we would kind of do it. I became personally more involved in it because now the boys were here. I was running this practice, and I wasn't going into the office, every day like I had been doing. And then fast forward to COVID-19, and you had no choice, right, but to do it. So whereas I had my BCTMH and had been doing it for a while, there were people in my practice who had not done it, who we really weren't doing video because, again, we did not want to increase any liability. How do we handle situations if someone is not stable or in crisis? We can't lay eyes on them, things like that. But then, like I said, COVID hit, and everybody was like, nope, you got to do it. And here's a quick training that you can do to make sure you're ethically doing it and you're following guidelines and things like that. And so now we're used to it, right? Everybody, or is kind of, getting used to it. But that's kind of like how that transition unfolded for me personally as an individual practice provider, and then as a group, owner. So that's how we kind of got there.
Yeah, and I can see how, for those that you help, it's so needed because for parents, especially mothers, right, getting a mother to go take care of herself outside the home is not an easy task, right? Yeah. So, and then just the logistics of that for a lot of parents is so difficult. And then again, being able to find a specialist locally that actually has an appointment available is really hard. So, has your practice seen like an increase in clientele, and what's the impact been on the clients that you've been seeing? Has it really actually been that beneficial to them? Do you see it being beneficial to them even without COVID-19 existing? What's that like?
Right, absolutely. So of course, COVID hit and we saw that downtick because people are like, oh, well, I'll just cancel my appointment and I'll see you in 2 weeks because most of us, the majority of us thought this was just going to be over in a couple of weeks. We'll all be back to normal life, right? And then we realized, well, no, we won't be back in April. Let's try May 1st. And then we won't be back May 1st. Let's try May 15th, right? We were kind of taking it like this 2 weeks at a time thing. And so then we started seeing our numbers kind of pick back up because people were like, well, I could hang for 2 weeks, but now here we are a month into this. Let me get back on. So we saw a significant decrease in the beginning, and it was concerning, right? And then it started picking back up. But I said the providers were getting used to telehealth, but our clients were also needing to get used to telehealth and get used to doing telehealth in the midst of trying to teach their own children, be away from work from home. The internet was choppy. All the platforms were overloaded and things like that. So we saw some frustration factors, but then we all kind of leveled out, right? We went through the crisis and then we leveled out. And we now are servicing people all around Georgia rather than just that, 3-4 county area that the practice is located. We've got folks down in Columbus and Savannah, Decatur, all around, and our practice is located centrally in Douglasville, Georgia, but we now have people all over. And so we had our monthly group consultation meeting via telehealth, right? On Monday, and I said, all right, y'all, it's official. We're not opening back up this year. But how are y'all feeling about that? Because none of you signed up to be solely a telehealth provider, right? Like, how are you feeling about that? And actually all of the therapists said, my clients have gotten used to it. I feel better. I've seen an increase in my caseload because now people aren't concerned about needing to battle traffic, get to the office, whereas I probably couldn't get there till 5 because of traffic. Now I can start seeing clients at 3 or 4, or, so they are saying, I even have a clinician who switched and now even doing like night shift, so to speak, and reaching clients who have later hours or keep later hours in their schedules. So we've seen the increase. We've seen our clients now get more used to it because there was some frustration. They're like, when are you opening? Come back. But I think many Americans were kind of like that, like, what is this? And then kind of got used to it. It's a battle just depending on what's going on with the platforms, and we may get to that. But for the most part, things are working, and we figured out how to shift. If you can't get an internet connection, just pick up the phone, and call, and how to kind of navigate all of that. But we have definitely seen a pickup and an increase, and it's actually been working out really well, to the point where we decided that even whenever we do open back up and return to some type of normalcy, we will still maintain some virtual days and have providers that are solely just virtual.
Yeah, and I'm curious, would you say more of your clients would prefer to see you, in the same location, like at your office, or virtually?
I think it's a good mixture of it. And so my specific clients and personal clients, they will all stay virtual. Like
Yeah.
they've been fine, but they were virtual prior to COVID. That's one of the things I did.
Okay.
Even before COVID, I would probably only go into the office once a month, or once or twice a month, really just to kind of check on it, lay eyes on my team members.
Oh,
But my clients had been virtual. And even some, maybe one or two would just come to the office just because. But if I had a day of 8 clients, 2 were in the office, 6 were still
okay.
either phone or video. So that's why I said I was a little more used to it than some of my practice members, team members. Their clients, some are, yep, nope, let's keep doing this. I love it. I don't have to worry about leaving the kids or finding a sitter or battling traffic. And then honestly, we do have some that really would prefer, in office, whether it's maybe couples work, or maybe they don't, feel safe or feel like they have a secure enough area in their home to do the sessions. Or quiet enough, or sometimes really people come to therapy to get away from all of that other stuff. And so that therapy office was their outlet and that place to kind of just be and be authentic and be there for that 50, 60 minutes, and they can shut out all of the other things of the world, right? So you do have those who would prefer to come back in, but I think we have a good mixture of those who are okay with remaining virtual and those who are ready to get back to the office.
Yeah. What are some common solutions to the challenge of people not having a space in their home that they feel, safe, or that's private, where they have their own space?
Yeah. So we've really navigated, had to kind of figure out how to best serve that and handle that. And we've had some clients maybe take different lunch breaks, right? We've had I remember one lady said she would go drive to the Walgreens and sit in the parking lot and do her session. And when I say safe, not just physical safety, right? But that emotional safety. Is someone in the next room going to be listening to me? Or my kids going to hear me weeping or crying if I'm talking about a particular issue? So their emotional and mental safety, but also that safety of family members, right, who may not need to hear what's going on, or if it's a couple session and it's getting kind of elevated, how are we navigating that? And so we've been able to kind of really be creative with that. One of the things we did talk about in that meeting Monday is we may consider opening the office one day for like half a day for those who really would benefit just from being in that physical space and, wearing masks and things like that. We haven't kind of figured it out and what day and what that will look like. But it's definitely something that we are considering, since we know we won't reopen till next year.
Mhm. Yeah, and I know one of the things that a lot of people are struggling with is, fatigue and burnout and so forth.
Yeah.
So one of the struggles of being a first-time parent, of an infant, is they demand everything, right? They need your constant 24/7 attention. Can't take your eyes off of them. They'll sleep for a couple hours, but you're listening out for them. So then you get to a point where your kids are off to school, at least for a portion of the day, but bam, no, not anymore. They're back home again, right? Where's my break? So I was wondering how your clients are handling COVID-19 in terms of their home life, and then you yourself and your team, how, what does self-care look like? We talked about self-care, but what does that look like, and how are you actually doing it during this time?
Absolutely. That is definitely something we talked about. I even talked about with the client yesterday. So one of the things I told one of my moms, she's like, I was just trying to get this control. And I said, honey, relinquish it. You have a kid now. They are in control. Like the sooner you come to this acceptance, the easier maybe it'll be, because, like they demand, as you say, every single your life now revolves around feeding, diapers, play time, tummy time, all of that stuff, right? But anyway, a few things with that. You're right. People did used to have that break because maybe their children were at school or in daycare, or the nanny was there for a few hours a day, or, grandparents were there. Somebody was kind of there, or maybe the kid, like my kids were home. We were homeschooling prior to COVID. Been doing it for 3 years. So they were home, but if I needed to go to the office, I could do that. And they were here with their nanny or my husband or someone. And so now, like you said, that all came to a screeching halt in March for many folks. And so again, very creative with what did self-care and that fatigue and downtime need to look like. So in the beginning, everybody was like, I got this. Even me, I said, well, my clients are already virtual. I already teach online. This should be a breeze. I got it. I do this already. And come May, I was like, okay, this is, it's a lot more meetings, and folks are needing, different resources. And then we started having like a lot of the racial injustices that were happening. And so that increased meetings, right? That increased sessions for many clients, or calls, because people needed to like really process that. And so, as many therapists do, we're like, go, go, go. We're making sure our clients are okay. We're making sure other people are okay. And then it was like, but what about our own fatigue? And then I got to a point saying, you know what? I'm tired of Zoom. I'm turning my camera off. Like, I'm in this meeting, but my resistance was I'm turning off my camera.
I could identify with that.
Yeah, I was like, I'm here, but I'm not here. But for real, like for me personally, and some of the things that I've talked with my team about is, set a time. Not only do you say, I'm not seeing a client after this amount of time. For me, I had to literally shut down my computer, like not just close the laptop. I had to cut it off, because I know me, I'll come like, oh, let me go look at this email real quick. All you got to do is open your laptop and it's all there. But if I had to take those extra few seconds or minutes for the computer to turn back on, me to pull back up all the tabs and things, that took a little more effort. And so I knew for me, I would not come back to it. There would be times where I'd say, I'm going to leave my computer in the car in the garage, and then it's not even in the house, because I had to have that ability to disconnect. Many people go to work, you leave work at work, you come home. Well, now everything was in your home space, right? And if you're with a partner, both of you are working from home, your kids, like that space is no longer like separated. And so that would be the same thing that we would encourage our clients. How can you delineate that space? How can you kind of reclaim your time, right? How can home life be home life, work life be work life? And something that I would always tell them, like social distancing, like I feel like it should have been called physical distancing, because you don't
That's
have
a
to.
very good point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because people were like, no, I can't do this. I'm like, well, how can you still connect with family members, with friends? Like, we don't have to socially disconnect. We just need to physically distance, right?
Great
Um,
point.
and so I would say, can you hold a Zoom happy hour with your friends? Can you and the guys get on a group chat or FaceTime or something like that, so you can still have that connection with folks outside? Can you take a lunch? Like, can you literally make sure you put time on your, like a timer on your phone, or a reminder to take a lunch break? Because when we're sitting here, we're just working, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's 2 o'clock and I haven't eaten. Oh my gosh, now it's 4 o'clock and I got to get dinner done. And so there was really no break. Whereas if we're in work, we may get up and walk to someone else's office, go to the water fountain. For folks who smoke, go take a smoke break, go to the bathroom, like all of those things that kept us disconnect or detach a little. That wasn't happening. So I was encouraging folks to make sure, hey, take your lunch break, go outside for some fresh air. Maybe change your space. If you're in these four walls, can you sit outside and do work that day? Can you go play with the kids in the backyard for about 30 minutes and then come back in? Can you take a walk? Those different things to try to kind of break up some of that fatigue that was really happening. I told my client yesterday, we're 7 months into this. We're all tired. We're done. Like, right. It's like those first few months, you're like, okay, yeah. But now, like, our bodies and our minds have been in this crisis mode and this trauma mode for 7 months.
Yeah.
And it's not like we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Depending on where folks are, the numbers are super high and they're back in phase 1, right? Or the numbers are low and then they're back up, but now it's cold and flu season. And so you don't know when this is ending. And that makes it even more of a fatigue because you don't even know how to kind of get out of it.
Yeah, I could relate to a lot of those things. Like I'm getting together with a group of guys this evening, but what we're doing is biking, right? So it's outdoors. We're all bringing masks.
Yep.
We're biking to a restaurant that has outdoor seating. So it's doing things differently. I could definitely relate to having to turn off the devices. It's like screen time is no longer how do I say, it's no longer like a great way for me to disconnect because I'm on the screen all day, right? But that's how I typically disconnect, is to watch a show at night. So being an industry leader and being the director of 2 different organizations yourself, what challenges have you come across and how'd you handle them? Because I hear you saying, like, you want to take care of your clients as a therapist. It's super important to take care of all of your clients, but it sounds like you also have a staff, right? And staff of clinicians. Are there challenges? Is there a challenge you have come across that you had to overcome with that?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, many of the clinicians were full-time, so they were there anywhere from 4 to 6 days a week. And again, that came to a screeching halt. We all thought we'd be back, and here we are in October, and we're not. Definitely the fatigue with some of them. But me checking in, how is your physical health? Like, how are you feeling? Right. Because if someone said, oh, you look in or like cancel their appointments because they're sick, and our first minds were like, oh my gosh, do you have COVID? Like, how sick are you? Like, what does that mean? Right.
Right.
Checking in with them, because we also went through like the pollen and the allergies, right? But that was that heightened fear of, if my throat tickles, what is this? And so like
that's a really good way to point out the fact when you were saying, hey, this is like 7 months in, we're in a heightened state of like concern, etc. That's a great way to point that out, because I relate to that. Like when people are sick, it's not like, oh, they're sick, they have a cold, allergies. It's like, oh no, like, do they have COVID, right? Yeah.
And that was scary. So like all of our anxieties are a little up, right? And so if you see that someone canceled for the day because they weren't feeling well, it's that first thing, like, are you okay? Like, I'm sending a text message, or I saw that you had canceled and you canceled again the next day. Like, what's going on, right? When in reality, it was just all the crazy pollen, or just normally people sometimes get a cold, right?
Right.
But one of the things that I do is I try to make sure that I'm texting, like, hey, how's your day going? Or, you're feeling better? I know you weren't feeling well a week or 2 ago. How are you now? Or we may, laugh about something, or we're sharing memes. We still do our group consultation. And so I'm like, hey, let's log on, everybody, so we can see your face and smiles and, all of that. Who's got the latest, joke? We have 2 that'll say, leave it to me to not be able to get my mic to work. And so we all, we laugh because we know it's true, right? Those that aren't as technologically savvy.
Yeah, I have a good story for you with that. So it was my birthday 2 days ago, and my work staff and my wife arranged for an online party. I was not aware of this, right? So we're having our weekly team meeting on video. My wife's banging at the door. I'm like, someone's banging at my door, guys. I got to check this out. I opened it up. My wife's there. I said, you know that I'm in a meeting, right? She goes, yeah. And she comes in with all the kids, and they put up a big poster in the back, and then I turn around and on the screens of every one of my team members, their backgrounds are decorated. They have hats on, and my wife brought in a pie, so we had a virtual birthday party for me. I was like, wow, right? Yeah, so that's a great point. We don't have the social distance, but physically distant.
Yeah. Well, happy belated birthday.
Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome. But yeah, definitely like checking in with them. Again, everybody wasn't used to this. And so in the beginning, we had a few clinicians that maybe had missed an appointment. Like, we're missing the appointment. And everybody that works with me, like, they know that's a pet peeve of mine. Like, we cannot, life happens, right? But if we hold our clients to a standard, we need to also reach that same standard. And so they were needing to navigate and get used to that. And so my assistant director, he's like, let's just check in and see how folks are emotionally doing and dealing with this, because that could be why maybe an appointment or two was missed, or that could be what's making the connecting to Doxy or getting on the phone more difficult, because our minds, we know what we would do in the office. Your client isn't there, let me call them 10 minutes in and see where they are. But where's this this disconnect, so to speak, happening, and trying to navigate that. So I'm constantly texting or maybe talking to my team members. I'll get my admins all on a virtual, like a Zoom, and I'm like, 30 minutes, y'all, let's just rant or laugh, or what's going on. How are you doing? I'm constantly reminding folks, like, look, I am very appreciative of you. I'm so thankful that you're here. So thankful that you're a part of our team. Like I said, I know this is not what you signed up for, but I'm grateful that you stuck with it and you're here. And so just really showing that compassion, but that care. If you've heard me say, my team, nobody works for me, right? Like, we're all team members, and I try to make sure that I keep that, trying to keep the morale up, trying to keep them updated on what's happening at New Vision. We're actually looking into purchasing our own building. So I'm going through the process now with that. And so I'm sending them pictures like, look, y'all, and this is what we're doing, and claiming office space. And, so trying to keep that. And there have been times I'm like, okay, maybe we can do some type of social distance gathering, but then I'm like, no, let's just not do that. But we all know when all of this is over. Prior to COVID, we used to do office retreats or go to the escape room, all of the things that, to a dinner or lunch. So they know when all of this is over, we're having a big party, we're having a big celebration. The clients know we're going to do a grand reopening, and we're going to have food and games and things like that. But I will say, like, as a leader, that has been a concern, because I genuinely care for the well-being of my team members. And we've talked about that fatigue, and what happens with the clients can definitely also happen with us as we're trying to navigate how to do this. I've had people say, like, I haven't had a hug since March.
Okay. Your clients or your staff?
Staff, both. Yeah, because maybe they live alone, they're in a higher risk population, and so it's very risky to be out. Or I haven't really done X, Y, and Z since this. I just got my first haircut since March, right? Even for me, getting my locks redone, it was just last month. Professionally, it was 6 months before it, so being that. And folks were like, I had one team member say, I just needed to get away. And I got in my car and I drove down to Hilton Head, got me a room, and ordered room service. Right.
Yes.
But it was a new scene. It was a new environment.
Get away. Yes. Get away.
We're still able to, again, physically distance, but now there's something. You hear the beach, the water, all of those things. And so I encourage team members and clients, is there anything? Can you take a day trip? Can you just look at the scenery, driving maybe through the mountains or something? Personally, we went up to a waterfall a few weeks ago just to do something different and see something different.
Right. Yeah. So, any maybe 2 suggestions for organizations wanting to improve their telemental health services in their organization. What were some things that really helped you guys making that transition?
So staying in contact. So if it's a group practice, right? Definitely staying in that constant communication with your team members, figuring out as the leader, how can you help them get the tools that they need to help them be successful in their job, which is servicing our clients, servicing the populations that we work with. I could easily say, you're all independent contractors, go get a training and bring me your certificate before we can book this, but I'm not doing that, right?
Right.
More work on me. It's more work maybe on the admins, but hey, this is what we're going to do. How are you feeling about it? Here's some links, right? Then do it and send that certificate. But then if you're working, by yourself, you're not a group or whatever, definitely making sure you're still connecting with other colleagues. And this is true even not of telehealth and COVID. How are you connecting with other colleagues and consulting to make sure you are doing what you're supposed to do, but also just like that check-in, someone to kind of remind you like, hey, we're all kind of feeling this way, right? Making sure if you're doing that telehealth, you are still following HIPAA. I know some guidelines were laxed earlier in all of this, but still trying to make sure you're following those the normal guidelines as much as possible. Making sure you understand like the security piece, making sure you remember again those things that you would do in the office to make sure that your client is stable and fit, that you're doing that still telehealth. How are you verifying their identity, right? It's a new client. Normally they would come with their ID and insurance card, but how are we handling and doing that? And so making sure, those things that you would do in the office, you're beefing them up and still doing virtually so that you can feel good about what you're doing. You can feel good that your client's okay. And we can all figure out, as they say, we're in this together, how we can kind of navigate it. So when we do return to the real world, or some type of normalcy of what we used to know, we're all still in business and we're all still good, right?
Yes, yep. And so that's great. That's very helpful. And I want to let everyone know too that Dr. Kristy Christopher-Holloway provides consultation to clinicians
Yes.
Across the country. So if you're working with a client who's struggling with perinatal struggles or infertility issues, then you can reach out to her for consultation. So you don't necessarily have to, tell your client that you can't work with them necessarily. But if you connect with someone like Kristy, then she'll be able to give you guidance and working with your clients around those issues.
Absolutely, most definitely. Because I want to point out that is a very unique population. And when we're talking about infertility, yes, you can do grief, but there are certain things, right? And you don't want to, as we know, we need to benefit our clients, right? And so we don't want to cause any harm. So you definitely want to consult just to make sure you're on the right page. And if you need to get extra training and things like that.
Yeah, with infertility stuff and grief and loss, one of the risks is the transference. So we bring our own baggage to the counseling session, and sometimes it can catch us by surprise. So if we at least can process that with someone like yourself, Kristy, to tell our consultant how we're feeling about what's going on with our client, et cetera, what our judgments are about that, or what we think good recommendations would be, et cetera, to bounce that off of a seasoned clinician first, so that we make sure that our stuff doesn't cause any harm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, thank you very much for your time. This has been fantastic.
Thank you. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you for having me.